At the beginning of the 20th century, when the Qing dynasty was breathing its last breath, the sound of striking metal could be heard in two of China's ancient capitals, Luoyang and Kaifeng. The mark of industrial civilization, the railroad, hammered its nails into the age-old central plains of China. This is the Longhai Railway, part of what is known today as the Eurasian Land Bridge. The cold metal of the railroad seems to embody the poverty and despair of countless generations along the Yellow River. The wheels on which it runs seem to awaken the dormant glory of a millennium's history. In the Mangshan region of Luoyang, work on the railroad ceases. This is the place where emperors and royal family were buried. It has the biggest concentration of royal burial grounds in the country. The construction of the railroad uncovers these royal tombs, many of which are swiftly robbed. Among the items that were stolen are some beautiful earthenware artifacts which had a shimmering glaze applied to them. Experts at the time had no idea what they were seeing. They didn't have a name for it because of its colorful designs and the fact that it was unearthed in Tang burial grounds. It is named Tang sancai. It is the only ceramic in China that is named after a dynasty. Tang sancai can have only come out of the Tang dynasty, a great empire that flourished more than 1,000 years ago. The Tang dynasty was an age of riches and commerce, wealth and cosmopolitanism. Only in a milieu like this can the colorful and lively designs of Tang sancai be born. The merchants, depicted with their horses and camels, are a relic of the ancient and prosperous Silk Road. Today, Dunhuang has become synonymous with the Mogao Caves. But in the Tang Dynasty, Dunhuang was famous for its location along the Silk Road. Beside the Crescent Lake in Dunhuang is a small village. Even today, camels are still an important possession for the villagers there. They shoulder the hopes of the villagers. At 4:30 in the morning every day, Nie Chuanbin shows up at the camel shed at the back of his house. He feeds the camels and saddles them up, preparing for the busy day ahead of him. The morning sun is still the same as that of 1,000 years ago. As it rises upon the land, a team of camels carry tourists into the dreamy world of the Silk Road. It is as if they are traveling through time. It is the same sand, the same camel humps. The only difference is the riders of the camel. The riders back then had sharp noses, beards, and wore felt hats and boots. They traveled halfway across Asia to come to Dunhuang in search of the splendors of the eastern capital. There, they hoped to find smooth silk, sweet wine, and a legendary earthenware pottery that resembled precious jade. The moment they walk through the thick city walls of Chang'an, these travelers are awestruck by the cacophony of the sights and sounds that greet them, leaving them with eyes wide and faces agog. This is the first city in the world whose population reached 1 million. Its surface area is 7 times the size of Rome and twice as big as Beijing in the Ming and Qing dynasty 1,000 years later. The majesty of the Daming Palace, the tranquility of the Jasmine Garden, the immensity of the giant Wild Goose Pagoda. It is no wonder that the great poet Li Bai once wrote, "How I long for you, Chang'an." Chang'an is a dream city. This is Xi'an's South Liaodong Street. Many buildings here are built to resemble ancient buildings. Few people know, however, that this was where the bustling West Market of the Tang Dynasty was located. In the Tang Dynasty, Chang'an had 2 markets, the East and the West markets. These markets were the commercial centers of the time. The West Market alone was 1 square kilometer in area. It was laid out according to a grid pattern. Just to cover the entire area by foot would take more than an hour. This led the free-spirited Li Bai to christen it the Golden Market. He writes, "A youth rides into the Golden Market. He laughs and drinks with Xiongnu women." In this dazzling labyrinth of drink and song, people in exotic costumes from all over the world crowd in the streets. They have come to the city with unbridled ambitions and dreams of success, forming an indispensable part of Chang'an's wild landscape. As such, they make an appearance in all the poems, songs, paintings, and cuisine of the Tang Dynasty.
Ceramics is as important to human civilization as tea leaves and silk.
This gives rise to a lingering question. Why are these precious treasures of a bygone era created out of sancai earthenware? Why did they stop short of firing it at a higher temperature to make it porcelain? Was it because porcelain making was still at its primitive stages? Actually, celadon was already invented in the Jiangnan region centuries before. Porcelain methods slowly spread to the north, where a type of white porcelain was made. Celadon from the southern Yue kiln and white porcelain from the northern Qing kiln became the 2 famous kinds of pottery found in China.
White porcelain was developed during the Sui and Tang dynasties. It is really only after the development of white porcelain that many more colors were added to the palette of Chinese ceramics.
According to historical records, white porcelain became common across all strata of society during the Tang Dynasty. Why then would Tang sancai turn its back against common porcelain methods? It is almost as if potters then wanted to inject some new blood into a millennia-old tradition. Pottery in this era started to become more colorful and feature more lively subject matter. Early Chinese pottery only featured 3 colors: red, green, and yellow. Blue and other colors were hardly ever seen in pottery. During the Tang Dynasty, however, the color blue started creeping into pottery along with other vibrant colors. But Chinese people at the time had no way of extracting the blue mineral cobalt. Since the texture of the Tang sancai pottery was not as high quality as porcelain, and since it featured Xiongnu people and camels, and since the raw material itself was not from China, but matched that of pottery made in Western Asian regions that was mostly glazed in blue, people began to wonder whether the so-called Tang sancai pottery was even made in China. In Xi'an, there is an area called Fangxiang. Most of the residents there are Muslim, and so this area has become famous for its halal food. At 10 in the morning, Su Shaolin is already preparing mo, a steamed leavened bread. One needs plenty of time to prepare the mo. He is breaking apart the mo so as to enhance the flavor when it is boiled. After doing that for 2 hours, he throws the mo into a lamb broth to make yang rou pao mo, a tantalizing dish of steamed flat bread soaked in lamb soup. Su is 84 years old this year. He has lived here his entire life. He believes that his ancestors came from the western regions during the Tang Dynasty. This mosque was built during the Tang Dynasty, and Yang Rou Pao Mo is a relic from those days. The dry and hard mo came from the nan of the western regions, and lamb was the most common meat found along the Silk Road. Without Yang Rou Pao Mo, the daring merchants from these regions would never have had the strength to reach the walls of Chang'an. Although the Silk Road brought many foreign cultures to China, there is no evidence to suggest that sancai came from the West. After all, it is brittle and easily damaged. It would never have survived the long and arduous journey. It is almost impossible that Tang sancai came from anywhere other than China. In 1984, archaeologists began excavating the Yaozhou kiln in the town of Huangbao, 80 kilometers north of Xi'an. They unearthed 7 Tang Dynasty workshops and 3 horseshoe-shaped sancai kilns, along with over 4,000 sancai tools and fragments. Soon, more sancai kilns were discovered in Hebei and Henan, most of them concentrated around Xi'an and Luoyang, the 2 major cities of the Tang Empire. Since then, Tang sancai's Chinese origin has remained undisputed. Of course, this doesn't preclude the fact that Tang sancai is the product of both Eastern and Western cultures. Although China has always been the leader in porcelain manufacturing, Western Asia has been known for its ceramic glazing techniques. With the spread of Islam came its reverence for the color blue. Because of this, the love of blue was very likely echoed across the central plains of China. Evidence suggests that Islam came to China 2 years after the Tang Emperor Li Shimin died. Perhaps the Chinese pottery merchants were first intrigued by the blue glaze on the spice boxes of the Arab merchants. Soon after, blue cobalt started to appear on the Silk Road. Blue was not common in the pottery excavated from the Yaozhou kiln in Shanxi. However, it was prominent in a kiln site belonging to a later period, the Gongyi kiln in Henan. Tang sancai pottery was neither practical nor easily transportable. It must have had a special function in Tang society. "70 kilometers northwest of Xi'an, a mountain rises in the distance. Here lies the Tianling Mausoleum, the tomb of Emperor Gaozong of Tang, and China's only governing female emperor, Wu Zetian. Due to restrictions, archaeologists have only excavated its attendant tombs. There, they have found many sancai sculptures of soldiers. More than 800 years before the Tang dynasty, Qin Shi Huang already had his terracotta army. These stunning, lifelike figures formed an army that followed and served the emperor into the afterlife. But they were hand-painted, not glazed. The figures of the Tang dynasty were glazed, turning them into arresting funerary decorations. In other words, Tang sancai, which has been famous over the ages, is a milestone in Chinese pottery and was used mainly in funerary art. This colorful art form added a shade of color to the afterlife of the royal family. Perhaps the one good thing that came out of these lavish funerary decorations is that they provide a window through which people today can view history. The sounds of musical instruments, the whirling fabric of the dancers' clothes, all the sights of the Tang dynasty are fixed here for eternity. We see this even in the other relics of the Tang era. In one mural in Li Xian's tomb, we see a grand procession of Tang officials greeting foreign dignitaries that have visited the court. In another mural, we see Tang men dressed in traditional Xiongnu costumes, playing polo on horseback. Another instance shows men hunting with a hawk. The Tang emperors were descendants of the Xianbei people after all. The openness of the Tang Empire did not just extend to the Silk Road, however. Nara, one of Japan's ancient cities. In 1966, over 300 pottery fragments were discovered under the Daiyan-ji in Nara. The fragments were reassembled to form close to 30 pieces of sancai wares. The origins of these fragments can be traced back to 718 AD, when the monk Doji Rishi returned to Japan after 17 years of studying Buddhism in the Tang Empire. Upon his return, he constructed the Daiyan-ji after the Shimmering temple in Chang'an. Daiyan-ji soon became one of the great temples of Nara. Even now, Daiyan-ji still retains much of its Tang flavor. The sancai wares must have entered Japan during that time.
At one point in history, there were as many as 887 scholarly monks that we know of. Many of these monks came from places such as China, India, Vietnam, as well as Champa. As a matter of fact, many of the monks here also went to the Tang Empire to study.
That probably led to Japanese artisans making their own version of sancai, the Nara sancai. Being so unique in the world, Tang sancai inspired many variants. Besides the Japanese variant, there are also versions of it from the Silla Kingdom of Korea and Persia.
But it was copied quite well in Iraq. It was easier for the Iraqi potters in the 9th century to copy sancai because it was a low-fired glaze, and it was not so different from the kind of glaze that they were using already in the Middle East.
Even after porcelain made its debut on the world stage, the Tang Empire gave new life to earthenware. The fierce colors and designs of Tang sancai brought the art of earthenware to its peak. It also fixed in time a glorious and exciting moment in history. Nevertheless, the enthusiasm for Tang sancai could not stem the tide of celadon and white porcelain. Amidst the songs and the dances, the decadent royal family must have wanted a part in this as well. But do we have evidence of this? It remains to be seen. In 1957, a few unremarkable white porcelain fragments were found in the Daming Palace in Xi'an. An inscription on one of the fragments aroused a lot of curiosity. The word ying. What does this word mean? Does it have anything to do with the porcelainware of the royal family? According to the Book of Tang, there was a warehouse during the reign of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang where gifts and ornaments were stored. This warehouse was called the Baibao Da Ying warehouse. And the word ying, described on the fragment, might be a reference to this. That would mean that at the height of the Tang Empire, the royal family already had its own porcelainware. And what about the celadon of the south? Celadon was the basis of white porcelain's development in the north. But with white porcelain on the rise, has celadon fallen out of favor? Famen Temple, a temple more than 100 kilometers west of Xi'an. This was the temple where the royal family worshipped in the Tang dynasty. This monk, Nung Lu, has been studying at the Famen Temple for over a year now. In his mind, this place is the closest you can get to Buddha.
My original name was Zhang. I was from Jiangxi. There has been a Buddhist scholar in every generation of my family. I've always wanted a life like this. It has its own meaning. I became a monk when I turned 21. I plan to study here for 2 years. I think Buddhist principles still apply to our everyday lives. It makes me happy to be able to study Buddhism.
In his free time, Nung Lu will go to the relic tower to pay his respects. This tower was built in 2009. It is 148 meters tall, the tallest relic tower in the world. It houses the relics of many venerable monks. However, it is in another ancient tower, the true relic pagoda, that an interesting story can be found. In the summer of 1981, a part of the pagoda wall collapsed in a massive thunderstorm. 6 years later, while reconstruction work was going on, a crypt was discovered under the pagoda. Previously buried Buddhist relics resurfaced along with the discovery of the crypt. But a stele is what allows our story to continue. The words on a stele are an inventory of the treasures in the crypt. Among other things, the crypt has 7 mystic color bowls, 2 silver beams, and 6 mystic color plates. These might not mean much to those looking for gems and precious metals, but when excavators found these pale green porcelain wares, they were struck by how translucent and jade-like the material was. This confirmed the words on the stele. Finally, the mystic-colored porcelain wares that were exclusive to the royal family at the time have resurfaced. Hidden for thousands of years, these secret relics of a time gone by have finally seen the light of day. Although this discovery was somewhat dwarfed by the discovery of the other relics in the crypt, the news resonated hundreds of kilometers away in the Yu kiln in Chang'an. In the 1940s, someone once wrote that the mystic colors of the Yuezhou were lost and that nobody would ever know what those words meant. Now, they no longer belong to the realm of the imagination. We can see these objects as it was described in the past. There is still widespread speculation on the origins of these mystic-colored porcelain wares, but the consensus on them is that these porcelain wares belong to the Celadon variety. The Tang poet Lu Guiming once wrote a poem named The Mystic-Colored Wares of Yue. After 9 autumns of wind and dew, the Yue kiln is opened. We finally see the emerald colors of 1,000 mountains. According to researchers, he was referring to the mystic-colored porcelain that was exclusive to the royal family. The Yue kiln in the poem undoubtedly refers to the north of Zhejiang, where Celadon was produced. Shanglan Lake, near the city of Qixi in Zhejiang. This place has retained its Tang-era name and is still filled with history. In 1935, when the father of ancient Chinese ceramics, Chen Wanli, first visited the Yue kilns, he remarked that the color of Shanglan Lake and the mountains surrounding it were a sparkling emerald, just like the emerald colors in Lu Guiming's poem. Maybe the Song Dynasty scholars were right. The porcelain of the Yue kiln is so precious and exquisite that it was forbidden to the common people. And that is why it is called the mystic colors.
The reason why so much good white porcelain and Celadon was produced during the Tang dynasty is because of the improvements in firing techniques in the kiln. In order to prevent any dust from getting into the porcelain, the people invented a case to house the porcelain when firing it.
Whether it is the Celadon from the south or the white porcelain from the north, both types of porcelain dominated the pottery of the time. They have set the imagination of the Tang Empire aflame. Although the glory of this porcelain can only be seen within the royal palace, the real glory belongs to the incredible artisans who produced it. One problem has always bothered historians, though. Although Tang porcelain has been found all over Western Asia and North Africa, very little of it has been found along the most important commercial route of that era, the Silk Road. How did these porcelain wares travel to those places? Some have surmised that this has something to do with the political changes in the western regions following the Anxi Rebellion, but somehow this explanation does not seem to tell the whole truth. On Belitung Island in Indonesia, fishermen are building new boats in preparation for another sea cucumber harvest. Sea cucumbers are a specialty of this area. But every time they dive underwater for the harvest, their hands always get cut by sharp objects lying at the bottom of the seabed. These sharp objects had turned out to be porcelain fragments of unknown origin. Matai is a local diving enthusiast. He has been fascinated by the underwater world ever since he was young, so the porcelain fragments at the bottom of the sea do not trouble him at all. Instead, they have become part of his diving obsession, even though he does not expect to profit from them. More than a decade ago, a German named Walter Fang came to the island. Matai and him went on diving expeditions in the area to excavate all these porcelain fragments. The islanders have long since gotten used to this spectacle.
The Batu Hitam is in the Galasa Strait, as it's called, which is a traditional route to go from the South China Sea down to Java. So it still is on a major shipping route, and it's quite dangerous.
Nobody could have known that a few years later, in 1998, the German and his team would excavate an entire shipwreck filled with all sorts of ceramics. The shipwreck was named the Batu Hitam Shipwreck, after the black coral in the area. Originally the owner of a cement factory, Walter Fang finally fulfilled his dream of discovering a sunken treasure. But little did he know how much of an impact the Batu Hitam shipwreck would make on Chinese culture. This is the only museum on Belitung. Only little remains of the discovery Walter Fang made in the area. Most people suspect that these pottery fragments came from China.
They found gold, goblets, bowls, and other Chinese ceramics. They also found many precious stones in the shipwreck. These objects were taken to England, where they were auctioned at Christie's and bought by the Singaporean government. Today, these objects are on display at the National Museum of Singapore.
This is the first ship load of Tang Dynasty Chinese ceramics ever discovered anywhere outside of China.
Feeder.
Yeah. Oh, you did in China. Because we never knew that one ship would carry so many objects all at one time.
May 2012, Singapore's Asian Civilizations Museum is organizing an exhibition of the Batu Hitam treasure for the 6th time. Over 67,000 ceramic wares were excavated from the shipwreck, making up 98% of all the artifacts excavated. This includes 350 white porcelain pieces, 200 celadon pieces, and 200 green glazed porcelain pieces. This proves that they came from ancient China. The shocking thing is that close to 56,500 pieces were glazed in brown. Yet there is no historical record of such a huge expedition. The 3 blue and white porcelain pieces, though, point to the possibility that the ship might have been a Ming Dynasty ship, when blue and white porcelain was common. Until one day, one of the restoration experts found an inscription on a bowl, the 16th day of the 7th month of the 2nd year of Emperor Jingzhong of Tang. This places the wares in the Tang dynasty, that is 826 AD. After further investigation of the artifacts, archaeologists have concluded that the Batu Hitam shipwreck was a ship from the glorious Tang dynasty. Its life prematurely ended under the sea.
We never realized that the volume was so great of this trade in ceramics between China and Southeast Asia at this period. It also suggests that the Chinese production system was extremely efficient already.
But these ceramic wares were neither celadon nor white porcelain. Where did they come from in China? After further restoration work, another inscription was revealed on one of the bowls, providing yet another clue. Hunan, Daochao City, Shizhu Village, Mengzi. Hunan refers to the Hunan province of today. In the Wangcheng area of Changsha, there is a Shizhu village as referred to in the bowl. There is also a Tang poem called Shizhu, whose first line is, "Along the ancient coast, earthenware is the ceramic of choice." Interestingly, near Shizhu village is the town of Tongguan, a town famous today for its ceramics. Could this all be merely a coincidence? Yong Qilin is the owner of a ceramics factory in town. His work deals with historical memory. Most other workshops produce ceramic wares similar in look to the ancient styles. The wares that come from this area look no different from those found in the Batu Hitam shipwreck. The only difference, perhaps, is the modern versus the traditional creation method. Perhaps they have the same origins, and the ceramics from the Batu Hitam shipwreck came from here. Near the town of Tongguan, an archaeological site has just opened its doors to the public. An ancient 41-meter-long dragon kiln snakes along the mountain. This is the Changsha Tongguan kiln. The ceramics from the Tongguan kiln are unique in the fact that the glaze is applied after the ware is painted. This method preserves the vibrant colors that have been applied by the artist. The firing adds a gentle shine to the piece, preserving its color. Historians agree that the Tongguan kiln was the first kiln to use this method on a large scale. It represents another milestone in the history of ceramics, breaking the dominance of celadon wares and white porcelain ceramics. The Tongguan kiln was discovered as early on as 1956. But why wasn't such a large-scale operation mentioned at all in any historical record? Scholars think that this might be because the Tongguan kiln did not manufacture ceramics for the court. Its simple and effective methods might mean that its ceramics were more geared towards common people. The elite strata of society would never have taken a liking to it. And so, historians have also adopted this bias. Perhaps it is precisely this lack of sophistication that led it to travel all around the world on ships like that which became the Batu Hitam shipwreck. Some of the wares found on the ship even had Arabic designs on them. This particular shipment was probably manufactured especially for foreign consumption.
The Changsha ware was essentially an export ware, and I don't think there was much Chinese taste for it. the Chinese taste was for the monochrome, for the plain, and the undecorated at that time. So the Changsha wares benefited from sancai potters coming from North China to South China. And I think a lot of the decorative styles that are used on Changsha wares.
These colorful ceramic exports proved to be very popular throughout the ancient trade routes. People from the West must have been attracted by the colorful ceramics of the Tang Empire. If these ceramics had some of their favorite patterns on top of them, then the people from the West would be able to show them off back home.
We can tell that there was a kind of interaction between people in China and people in the Middle East. This is extremely fascinating because it was a time where there was no internet, no telephone, but people could see, what was the appeal, what other people wanted.
All this benefited from the development of maritime trade. According to historians, shipbuilders in the Tang Dynasty were already building ships that were 50 to 60 meters long and had watertight bulkheads. This happened 900 years before Europe discovered the same technology. A ship like this could transport many more goods than a camel could. In addition, goods were damaged easily on the backs of camels. Some modern-day scholars even believe that maritime trade is the reason behind the Silk Road's eventual decline. This is Singapore's famous Chinatown. Jufuchang is well known in this neighborhood. Every time people hear that horn, they know that Chang is here to deliver the papers again.
Every day at 4 in the morning, I would practice my martial arts for about an hour. I would do this all the time before getting the papers. In 1818, my great-grandfather came to Singapore with my father, and they stayed on and settled here. In the past, the houses used to cost only $1. They used to cost $1. You can sit here first.
He came to Singapore with his mother when he was just 8 years old. He has lived here for over 50 years. Jufuchang's story is common among Southeast Asian Chinese, but this narrative has been going on ever since the Tang Dynasty. Chinese people came with the merchant ships to this stop along the Silk Road of the sea. They settled down here with only their strength and their wits. Regardless of their destination, these ships transporting ceramics, silk, and tea leaves would stop in Southeast Asia to rest and replenish. At the same time, they would sell off some of their wares in exchange for some local products. In the Singapore Maritime Museum, there is a replica of a 9th century Arabic ship. Scholars say that the ship in the Batu Hitam shipwreck resembles this replica. Unfortunately, the Batu Hitam will never reach another shore. The Arabic Peninsula sits between Europe and Asia, between the Silk Road on land and the Silk Road of the sea. The Arabs are the best merchants to travel between East and West. Not only are they familiar with the maritime route from the Red Sea to East Asia, they also know the trade winds of the Indian Ocean by heart. These Arabian merchants gave rise to legends such as Captain Sinbad, who began his strange voyage in Arabian Nights. It was voyages such as his that connected the East and the West and left Chinese ceramics in West Asia, North Africa, and even Southern Europe. It can be said that the Tang dynasty was the most glorious era of the Chinese people. Its majesty was known throughout the world. Like the rays of the sun, it spread culture to the furthest regions of the world. At the same time, it attracted and absorbed cultures from all over, cementing its reputation as a true cosmopolitan trade center. Perhaps the Tang Empire even inspired Western civilizations to seek out other distant cultures. The green glazed porcelain bowl found on the Batu Hitam shipwreck has the word tribute inscribed on it. Some surmise that this might be for royal uses, that the ship might have belonged to a foreign emissary on a diplomatic mission. These three Tang-era blue and white porcelain artifacts can be traced back to Gongyi in Henan. 400 years later, it would inspire the blue and white porcelain of the Yuan dynasty. In the next episode, across 1,000 years, they try to find the last breaths of a vanished empire. Over 1,000 kilometers, they are bound by the machinations of fate. A Song dynasty couple is torn apart by the sea. This is the third episode of Porcelain Story, Sky Green.